took everything from us! Chika, what are you saying? Don't act innocent! Everywhere we go, it is always Amaka this, Amaka that. Men looked at us first because of our beauty, but somehow they always chose you. I swear to you, I never took anything from you. You are my... Shut up! Pretending to be kind. Pretending to be innocent. Chika, please, don't do this. If it is the prince you want, you can have him. I will leave him. I swear it. Please, spare me. It's too late, Amaka. Chika, please.
The four girls grew up like sisters, shared secrets, dreams, and memories. But on this lonely bridge, the same hands she once held in trust became the hands that pushed her to death. Amaka was the kind of village that made you believe God had favorites. The air there was thick and warm, carrying the smell of red earth after rain, of burning firewood and fresh palm oil. The trees stood tall along every path, their roots running deep into stories older than anyone alive. The Oji stream cut through the heart of the village like a silver thread, and in the dry season, its banks turned to soft red clay where women washed and children played, and old men sat and remembered. It was a beautiful place, and it had beautiful daughters. 4 of them walked together through Amaka like a song: Amaka, Chika, Chioma, and Chisom. Wherever they went, people turned to look. The market, the stream, the festival grounds during the new yam season, heads turned, conversations paused. Young men found sudden reasons to walk the same direction. Chika was the one they saw first. That was simply the truth of it. She was tall and bright-skinned, with cheekbones that caught light like polished wood, and she walked like someone who had always known she was being watched. She was the most physically beautiful among them, and she knew it the way she knew her own name, completely and without question. Chioma was beautiful too. Softer in face, rounder in features, with large eyes that made her look permanently surprised. She laughed easy and followed Chika the way a shadow follows its owner, not always because she wanted to, but because she didn't know what else to do. Chisom was quieter, prettier than she believed herself to be, with a gentleness about her face that made strangers trust her immediately. She felt things deeply. She just rarely acted on what she felt. And then there was Amaka. Amaka was not the most beautiful. Anyone looking at the 4 of them together would say so honestly. Her features were soft and unassuming, wide dark eyes, full lips that smiled easily, skin the deep brown of river clay. She was not the one you noticed first. She was the one you never forgot. It was a Tuesday at the market when it started to change between them, not dramatically, not loudly, but in the quiet way that all important things begin. The 4 girls were buying tomatoes when they heard crying. A small boy, no more than 5, standing alone between 2 stalls, his chin pressed to his chest, tears running into his mouth. His mother was somewhere in the crowd, and he had lost her completely. The market kept moving around him. People glanced and walked past. The boy cried harder. Amaka set down her basket. She crossed to him, crouched until she was at his height, and spoke to him softly. She took his small hand in hers and began to walk him through the crowd, calling out for his mother. It took nearly 10 minutes. When the mother finally appeared, frantic, eyes red, she grabbed her son and held him, then turned to Amaka and grabbed her too, pressing Amaka's face against her chest, praying over her in rapid Igbo. The women nearby watched. Some clapped. An old trader called out, "That one has a good heart. Whoever her mother is, she raised her well." Amaka just smiled and came back for her basket. Chika was watching from where she stood. Her face was arranged into something that looked like warmth, but her hands, down at her sides, were pressed flat against her thighs. It had happened before. It kept happening. At the stream, Amaka had once jumped in with her wrapper and all to save a neighbor's child from drowning. The whole bank had erupted. People called her brave. People called her wonderful. The child's grandmother had pressed her forehead to Amaka's hands and wept. In the evenings, when the four girls walked home together, old women would stop Amaka specifically, call her by name, press garden eggs and groundnuts into her hands, pray for her future husband, pray for her children, pray for her long life. They loved Chika too, but differently. The way you love a beautiful thing you admire from a distance. They loved Amaka the way you love someone you trust with your life. Chika had started to notice the difference long before she admitted it to herself, and the noticing had settled inside her like a stone, small at first, then heavier, then impossible to ignore.
How can someone less beautiful than me shine brighter than me?
She had no answer. The question just kept growing. Prince Chike was not what people expected a prince to be. He was handsome, that part they expected. Tall, broad-shouldered, with his father's serious jaw and his mother's quiet eyes. He wore his title without noise. He did not ride through the village demanding attention. He walked among his people like a man who understood that one day they would be his responsibility, and he was still learning their faces. He was 24 and unmarried, and the whole village of Umuhoka had an opinion about what kind of woman should stand beside him. The evening he saw the four girls at the river, he had come down from the palace with 2 attendants to check on a water dispute between 2 farming families. The matter was small. It was almost resolved. And then the 4 girls came down the opposite bank to fetch water, and everything stopped being small. His eyes went to Chika. Of course they did. She moved the way a flame moves, with complete confidence that everything nearby will orient itself toward her. She laughed at something Chioma said and tossed her head back, and even from across the water, the gesture was arresting. But then his eyes moved. At the edge of the bank, just where the stones became slippery and the water ran faster, a blind old woman had stopped walking. She stood with her stick raised, unable to find solid footing, her free hand trembling in the air. The girls had not noticed her. The people nearby had not stopped. But Amaka noticed. She set her clay pot down on the bank without a word and went to the old woman. She took her arm, spoke to her quietly. Then, with one careful step at a time, she guided the woman across the slippery section, staying close, one hand on the woman's arm and one hand ready to catch if she fell. The old woman reached the other side safely. She touched Amaka's face with both palms and said something. Amaka laughed softly and shook her head, like whatever the woman had said was too much. Then she went back for her pot. Prince Chike had not moved. One of his attendants said something. He did not hear it. He was still watching the spot where Amaka had stood, her feet steady on the slippery stones, her attention entirely on someone other than herself. He found out her name before the week was over. He began to cross paths with her in ways that were not accidental. At the market at the same hour, on the path toward the stream at the same time of morning. He watched her the way you watch something you are trying to understand. He saw her give the last of her afternoon meal to a boy with hungry eyes. He saw her stop a quarrel between 2 neighbors with a gentleness that made both of them ashamed of themselves. He saw her when she did not know anyone important was watching. That was what convinced him. On a Thursday morning, 11 days after he first saw her at the river, Prince Chike arrived at Amaka's family compound with palm wine, kola nut, a length of good fabric, and 2 attendants. He sat before her father and stated his intention clearly and respectfully, the way a man raised well states things. Amaka was not in the compound when he arrived. She came home to find her mother standing in the middle of the yard with both hands pressed over her mouth and tears running silently down her face. That evening, Amaka ran. She ran the whole path to Chike's compound, breathless, her wrapper nearly coming loose at the waist. She burst through the entrance and found all 3 of them there, Chike, Chioma, Chisom, sitting in the fading light of the compound, and she stopped in front of them, chest heaving, eyes wide and wet.
"He came," she said. "Prince Chike came to my father's house. He brought wine, he brought kola." She pressed both hands to her own chest like she was trying to hold her heart in. "He chose me to be his wife." For one moment, nobody spoke. Then Chioma screamed and grabbed her. Chisom was laughing and crying at the same time. They held her, all three of them, jumping, saying her name, saying congratulations, saying God is good. Chika held her longest. "I am so happy for you," Chika said into her ear. Her voice was steady, warm, and perfect. "You deserve this." Amaka pulled back and looked at her best friend's face and saw everything she needed to see. Joy, love, pride. But she did not see what was underneath. Nobody ever does. Amaka left an hour later, walking home in the last of the evening light, her heart so full she felt she might overflow. Behind her, in Chika's compound, the silence came down like a blade. Chioma sat back down slowly. Chisom stared at the ground. Chika stood in the middle of the yard. She did not cry. Not yet. She stood very still, her fists loose at her sides, her jaw tight, her eyes fixed on the entrance through which Amaka had just disappeared.
When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, controlled, colder than anything the evening air could explain. She took the one thing that was supposed to be mine. No one answered. Chioma looked at Chisom. Chisom looked at the ground. Chika went home. She sat in front of the small mirror on her table, the one she had looked into her whole life, the one that had always confirmed what the world told her. You are the beautiful one. You are the chosen one. You are the one who should have everything. She sat in front of it for a long time. Then she picked it up and smashed it against the wall. It shattered. Pieces scattered across the floor like broken promises. She lay down on her mat in the dark and she cried. She cried the way people cry when they realize the world does not work the way they believed it did. Hard and ugly, and for a long time. And when the crying stopped, something else was in its place. Something harder. Something decided. "If Amaka lives," she whispered to the dark ceiling, "my dreams of marrying the prince are dead." And that night, she made a terrible decision. She was going to get rid of Amaka. 2 days after Amaka's news, Chika went to Chioma's compound alone in the late afternoon when the others were not around, and she sat down and talked to her. She did not talk about murder, not at first. She talked about loss. She talked about what it felt like to be the most beautiful girl in Umuoka and still be passed over. She talked about the prince, how he had looked at her that day at the river, how she had felt it, how it should have been her sitting in that compound receiving wine and cola. "She took it from us," Chika said, "not just from me, from all of us. We were supposed to rise together. Now she rises and we stay here forever." Chioma listened. She was not hard enough to be unmoved. Then Chika lowered her voice and told her she was planning to get rid of Amaka. Chioma stood up immediately. "No." Her voice was firm and afraid. "No, Chika, whatever you are thinking, no. I will not be part of that." She kept on trying to convince her. She came back the next day, and the day after that. She went to Chisom differently, with tears. She sat before Chisom and cried, real tears or something close enough, and she talked about her dreams, the life she had imagined, the palace she had pictured. She told Chisom how she had watched every girl in Umoka and thought none of them can take what is mine. She had believed it. She had built her whole life on it. And now, Chika said, her voice breaking, "I will spend the rest of my life watching Amaka live the life that God wrote for me. Every time I see her face, every time someone says her name, it kills me a little more." Chisom's eyes were wet. Chika, what are you saying? I am saying I cannot breathe, Chika said. I am saying I need this to stop. This is wrong, Chisom whispered. What you are planning is wrong. I know, Chika said quietly, and she looked at Chisom with such raw, focused desperation that Chisom felt the ground shift beneath her. It took 6 days, 6 days of Chika working on them separately, together, relentlessly. She reminded them of every moment Amaka had outshined them without trying, every prayer an old woman had said over Amaka's head instead of theirs, every pair of male eyes that had followed Amaka instead of them. She named the resentments they had never spoken aloud and placed them on the table between the three of them like evidence. She was patient. She was deliberate. She never raised her voice. And slowly, in the way that slow water cracks solid rock, they broke. Chioma broke first. She stopped saying no and started saying maybe. Then she stopped saying maybe and went quiet. And quiet, Chika had learned, was agreement. Chisom held out 2 days longer, but Chisom had always been someone who could not bear to be left out of something, even when that something was terrible. On the 6th evening, she looked at the ground and said, "What is the plan?" The three of them sat together and built it. They would invite Amaka to the bridge over the OG stream, a small celebration, just the four of them, the way they always marked good things. They would bring food, they would bring laughter. They would make her believe that her joy was their joy, and then they would take her to the edge. Chisom kept swallowing. Chioma kept looking at the door, but neither of them left. The day came soft and ordinary. Amaka arrived smiling, her heart light. Her friends were waiting on the bridge with a small cloth spread, chin-chin, roasted groundnuts, ripe oranges. They greeted her with hugs and laughter. "You did all this for me?" Amaka asked, eyes shining. "Of course," Chika said, smiling. "Today is about you, our special girl." They ate and talked like old times. Chika laughed at Amaka's stories. Chioma kept refilling her orange. Chisom stayed close, though her hands trembled slightly whenever she looked at the water below. For a while it felt real. Amaka felt wrapped in their love. She laughed at something Chioma said. She bit into an orange and looked out at the water and thought, this is what happiness feels like. This is what it feels like to have people who love you. She was still thinking it when the laughter stopped. Chika's voice changed first. Still sweet on the surface, but with an edge underneath. "You know," Chika said lightly, biting into an orange, "some people get everything without even trying. It must be nice." Amaka blinked, unsure. "What do you mean by that?" Choma smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The prince, choosing you. Everyone always choosing you. Even the old women at the market. It's like the village has only eyes for one person these days." Chisom shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Amaka's smile faded. "I never asked for any of that. We've always been together." "You never asked," Chika cut in, stepping closer. "But you still took it. Every good thing that should have been ours, the praise, the love, even the prince. You stood in our light your whole life and pretended you didn't know what you were doing." "Chika?" Chioma said from behind her, though her voice shook. "You are so heartless." Amaka turned to look at them. Chioma, whose eyes were wet, Chisom, whose hands were trembling at her sides. "What is happening?" Amaka's voice was very small. "What are you doing?" She looked back at Chika, who was now coming towards her with bitterness. She searched her face for the girl she had grown up beside. The girl who had shared her food. The girl whose name she knew how to say in 6 different tones. "Chika," she said. Just a name. Like a plea. Chisom made a sound, half word, half sob. She stepped forward. By now, Amaka, who had been moving back from Chika, was now at the edge of the bridge. Chika, having calculated everything perfectly, pushed her hard with all her strength. The push caught Amaka in the chest, and she went backwards over the railing before her mind could understand what her body was already doing. She grabbed at the thin air. She grabbed at nothing. and she fell from the bridge down into the surging river below. The water came up and swallowed her, cold and absolute, and the last thing she heard before it closed over her head was her own voice screaming a name, Chika. Below the bridge, in the shallow shadows of the riverbank, where the reeds grew thick and the catfish moved slowly, an old fisherman crouched over his fishing nets. His name was Paojuku. He heard the scream before he heard the splash. He quickly dropped his nets and frantically ran towards the direction of the scream.